Part 1. Last spring, a gardener, someone with decades of experience, someone who had been tending the same soil for longer than most people keep a car, walked out after 3 straight days of rain. Everything looked beautiful from the top. The soil was dark and glistening. The leaves were bright green. A good long drink, it seemed, nothing to worry about. But something felt wrong. A quiet instinct, the kind that only comes from years of watching things grow. So the trowel went in, 8 inches down into the heavy clay that so many gardens are built on. And what came up was heartbreaking. The soil was gray, cold, completely airless. It smelled like a basement that had not been opened in years. And the roots of a tomato plant, roots that had been nurtured from seed, watered carefully, watched over with hope, were sitting in that suffocating darkness, slowly dying. That plant was gone within 2 weeks, and the gardener blamed herself, thought she had overwatered, thought maybe the fertilizer was wrong, or the planting too deep, or some small, careless mistake. She was wrong. And every gardener who has ever lost a plant to heavy clay and carried that guilt, they were wrong too. Because the real killer was something no one ever warned them about, something invisible, something that has nothing to do with water, sunlight, or nutrients. Welcome to Rooted in Grace. What is about to unfold in this video could change the way anyone thinks about a garden forever. Today's story reveals the #1 mistake that experienced gardeners make with clay soil. A mistake the gardening industry has absolutely no interest in helping anyone fix. And then comes a solution that costs $0, takes 10 minutes, and uses something that was probably headed for the recycling bin this very afternoon. Stay for this one. It is important. Part 2. The Invisible Killer. Beneath the garden. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. Everyone knows plants need 3 things: sunlight, water, and nutrients. That is what every textbook teaches. That is what every bag of fertilizer in the store repeats. But what if there is a 4th thing? Something just as essential as water, perhaps even more essential, that almost nobody talks about. Breath. Roots need to breathe. Every single root in every garden on Earth is taking in oxygen, just like any living creature does. Roots are not just drinking water down there, they are breathing. And when they cannot breathe, they die. It is that simple. And here is where clay soil becomes a problem that most people never truly understand. Clay particles are unbelievably tiny, smaller than 0.002 of a millimeter. When it rains, those microscopic particles pack together so tightly that they squeeze out almost every pocket of air in the soil. A healthy soil holds about 25% air in its pore spaces, but saturated clay? It drops to somewhere between 2 and 5%. Think about it this way. Imagine being in a room and someone slowly pumps out 90% of the oxygen. No one would last long. That is exactly what happens to roots after every heavy rain in clay soil. And here is the part that breaks hearts, because it is something most gardeners never learn. When oxygen levels around the roots fall below about 10%, the plant's metabolism starts shutting down. Growth stops. Nutrient absorption stops. And when oxygen drops below 5%, this is the part that shocks even veteran growers, the roots actually start producing ethanol. The exact same chemical process that happens when a sealed bottle of liquid ferments. That ethanol builds up inside the root tissue and destroys the cell walls from the inside out. The root literally poisons itself trying to survive without air. And that is the real beginning of root rot. It is not a fungus that appears out of nowhere. The suffocation comes first. The fungus is just nature's cleanup crew, arriving after the damage is already done. So, when a plant dies in clay soil, the gardener did not fail. The soil failed the plant. And once that is understood, truly understood, the path to fixing it becomes clear. But first, here is why the most common fix actually makes things worse. Part 3. The billion-dollar illusion. There is something strange about the modern garden center. A person walks in with a simple problem, the clay is too hard, the plants are struggling, and walks out with a cart full of products they are not entirely sure they need. A bottle of liquid soil conditioner, a bag of some kind of amendment, maybe a rental aerator, if the back can handle it. This is not a rare experience. The global soil amendment and conditioner market was valued at $8.5 billion in 2022. Let that number settle in for a moment. $8.5 billion. And it is growing every single year. That massive industry exists in large part because home gardeners and small farmers have been led to believe that healthy soil requires something purchased. The real prices tell the story. A mechanical core aerator starts at about $180. Electric models run $400 to $600. Liquid soil conditioners, the ones promising to magically break up clay, cost $30 to $80 per treatment per season. And they never stop selling because the effect is temporary. Season after season, year after year, the buying never ends. Now, none of these are necessarily bad products. Some do help in the short term. But here is the frustrating part. There exists a method, a profoundly simple method that costs nothing, works permanently, and addresses the root cause of the problem rather than just masking the symptoms. But it will never appear on a shelf. Because when a solution is free, it does not get a marketing budget. It does not get an advertisement. It does not get prime placement in the spring garden section. And there is another thing the garden center will never mention. Standard surface tilling, the go-to recommendation for compacted clay, only breaks up the top 2 to 4 inches of soil. But plant roots reach 6, 12, sometimes 18 inches deep. Tilling the surface is like aerating the ceiling of a room while the room itself stays completely airless. So what does work? The answer is surprising. It was not invented in a laboratory. It was not developed by a corporation. It was discovered thousands of years ago by people who listened to the earth far more carefully than the modern world does today. Part 4. Reclaiming the Wisdom of the Ancients. A journey back in time, just for a moment, because this may be one of the most fascinating chapters in the story of soil. Around the year 400 BCE, more than 2,000 years ago, Roman agricultural engineers were wrestling with the exact same problem that plagues backyards today. Heavy, compacted clay, strangled roots, failed harvests. They called this dense, suffocating layer the sub-solemn challenge, and their solution was so elegant, it gives a person chills just thinking about it. They buried unglazed, porous terracotta pipes vertically into the earth, angled so that air could flow naturally into the deep soil. They called this system spiritus terra, the breath of the earth. No machinery, no chemicals, just hollow chambers carrying air to where the roots needed it most. Hold that image. It is coming back shortly. Further east, in the ancient agrarian cultures of India, there is something even more profound. In those traditions, the soil was never treated as just dirt, a dead, lifeless substance to be forced into productivity. The soil was revered as a living being. The ground beneath the feet was understood to be teeming with invisible life, microorganisms, insects, organic matter, all working in harmony. The agricultural philosophy was built on one elegant principle: work with nature, never against it. Align every practice with what the earth is already trying to do. And for thousands of years, that wisdom fed civilizations. Then, in the 20th century, mechanized agriculture arrived. Tractors, synthetic fertilizers, chemical treatments. The deep, patient wisdom of treating soil as a living, breathing partner was quietly pushed aside, replaced by speed, force, and profit. But here is the beautiful thing. That ancient knowledge never fully disappeared. It survived in the margins, kept alive by quiet, observant farmers who paid close attention to what the land was telling them. And today, that wisdom is about to come back to life with something so simple it might earn a laugh: an empty plastic bottle. Part 5. The Magic of a Gentle Breeze. An empty bottle? Really? How can a piece of recycling change anything underground? Fair question. And the answer involves a beautiful little piece of physics that has been hiding in plain sight for nearly 300 years. Back in 1738, a mathematician named Daniel Bernoulli figured out something remarkable about the way air moves. He discovered that when air speeds up, say when a breeze passes across a narrow opening, the pressure in that spot drops. It creates a gentle but persistent pulling force, almost like a very soft, invisible vacuum. Everyone has felt this. Standing near a cracked window on a windy day, that feeling of air being pulled through the small gap. That is Bernoulli's principle at work. Now, here is where it gets exciting. Picture a large empty plastic bottle, at least 1.5 liters. The bottom is cut off. The bottle is buried in clay soil, with the narrow neck sticking up just 1 inch or 2 above the ground. The open bottom now sits deep in the earth, right in the zone where roots are suffocating. Every time the wind blows across that exposed bottleneck, and the wind is almost always moving, even slightly, it creates that Bernoulli pressure drop right at the opening. That gentle vacuum pulls the stale, heavy, carbon dioxide-laden air up and out of the deep soil. And as that old air rises, fresh, oxygen-rich air is drawn down to replace it. The bottle has just become a lung for the earth. And it does this continuously, day and night. No batteries, no moving parts, no maintenance. Just physics doing what physics does. And the reach of this little system is startling. The effect is not limited to the tiny space inside the bottle. The pressure difference pulls air through the interconnected pore spaces of the soil in a radius of roughly 8 to 14 inches around each buried unit.
3 or 4 properly spaced bottles can breathe life into a root zone that no hand tool or expensive aerator could ever meaningfully reach. Remember those Roman terracotta pipes? The spiritus terra, the breath of the earth. This is the same thing, same principle, same result. Except this version is free, and it is sitting in the recycling bin right now. But here is the thing. The physics is only half the miracle. The other half is alive, and it is already waiting in the garden, ready to be invited deeper.
Part 6. The Biological Army Beneath the Surface. A curious detail most people overlook. Earthworms in clay gardens almost always stay near the surface. The top 2 or 3 inches, rarely deeper. There is a reason for that. Earthworms need oxygen just like roots do. In compacted clay, the deep layers are so airless that the worms simply refuse to go there. They stay near the surface where they can still breathe. And that is a tragedy. Because earthworms are the greatest soil engineers on the planet. A single earthworm produces roughly 11 pounds of nutrient-rich castings every year. Their tunnels can reach 3 to 6 feet deep. A healthy earthworm population can increase the deep soil's porosity by up to 40%. But they cannot work where they cannot breathe. Until now. This is where the buried plastic bottle becomes something truly extraordinary. By pumping fresh oxygen into the deep clay, the bottle opens a door that was previously sealed shut. The earthworms can finally follow. And there is a way to sweeten the invitation. Those kitchen scraps that get tossed out every day, coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, tiny bits of banana peel. Instead of going to the trash, they go directly down the neck of the buried bottle. That organic material starts decomposing deep underground. The microbial activity generates a faint warmth and chemical signals that earthworms can detect from a distance. They smell the feast. They feel the fresh air flowing from the bottle, and they follow that trail downward into soil they would never have entered on their own. And here is the magic. An earthworm feeding at depth is an earthworm tunneling at depth. Every inch of tunnel it creates becomes a new permanent channel for air, water, and nutrients. Those tunnels are highways through the clay, built by biology, not by brute force. No more breaking a back with a heavy shovel, no renting machines. A silent, tireless biological army working for free around the clock,
doing heavy labor that no tool can match. Real, structural, deep change, accomplished by nature, not machinery.
And there is still one more piece of this puzzle. The piece that makes the whole transformation permanent.
Part 7. The Amish humus method.
Stop fighting the clay. Walk through a forest sometime. Notice how soft the ground feels underfoot. No one tills a forest. No one aerates it. No one sprays it with chemicals. And yet the soil is rich, dark, crumbly, and absolutely alive. Why? Because the forest feeds itself from the top. Leaves fall, branches decay. Layer after layer of organic matter lands on the surface, slowly breaking down and nourishing the ecosystem below. The forest floor is nature's perfect soil-building machine. The Amish farming communities figured this out generations ago. They discovered something that sounds almost too simple to be true. Stop digging. Every time a heavy tiller drives through clay soil, the problem actually gets worse. The machine breaks up the surface, sure, but the vibration and pressure collapse the deeper soil structure even further. The clay particles get squeezed tighter together. When they dry, they set like a brick. The Amish approach is the opposite of force. It is patience. It is mimicking what the forest does naturally. Here's how it works. Plain, uncoated cardboard, an old box, a shipping package, whatever is on hand, gets laid directly over the clay surface, edges overlapping, soaked with water. That wet cardboard creates a dark, moist layer that beneficial fungi absolutely love. On top of the cardboard go layers of organic material, straw, shredded leaves, aged manure, kitchen scraps, whatever is available, piled thick, 6 to 8 inches. And then time does what time does best. The fungi weave delicate white threads through the clay, creating tiny tunnels. The microbes break down the organic matter and release natural glues, sticky compounds that bind those impossibly tiny clay particles into larger, crumbly clumps. Soil scientists call them aggregates. A simpler word might be miracle. And here is where the Amish method and the plastic bottle trick create something truly magnificent together.
Feeding the soil from the top with organic layers, while breathing life into the deep roots with buried bottles. This transforms the clay from both directions at once.
The biology works from above and below, meeting in the middle. This is not a quick fix that wears off next season. The humus that builds lasts for decades. It stores nutrients, it regulates moisture. It gives roots a home they can actually thrive in. This is no longer just growing plants. This is building living soil that will outlast a lifetime. And honestly, there are few things in this world more meaningful than that.
Part 8. The Step-by-Step Guide.
All right, time to roll up the sleeves. Here is exactly how this works, step by step. Anyone who can cut a plastic bottle with a pair of scissors can do this. Step 1. Gather the bottles. 3 or 4 large plastic bottles. Soda bottles, water bottles, milk jugs. Anything that holds at least 1.5 liters. The bigger the bottle, the bigger the underground air chamber, and the stronger the passive breathing effect. The recycling bin probably has what is needed right now. Step 2. Prepare the bottle. Remove the cap, it will not be needed. Then carefully cut off the entire bottom of the bottle. The result is an open tube, cap end on one side, wide opening on the other. Step 3. Choose the spot. Find the root zone of a struggling plant, or a patch of the garden where the clay is stubbornly heavy. That spot where the trowel just refuses to cooperate. That is the target. Step 4. Dig and bury. Dig a hole about 8 inches deep. Place the bottle in, cap side down, narrow neck pointing up toward the sky. The neck should stick up about 1 to 2 inches above the ground. That exposed neck is the chimney, the place where the wind creates the magic. And here is the reassuring part. If the hole ends up 7 inches deep instead of 8, that is perfectly fine. Nature is very forgiving. Step 5. Pack it tight. Fill the soil firmly around the outside of the bottle. A good seal matters. The system works best when the chimney neck is the primary path for air movement, not gaps in loose dirt around the edges. Step 6. Feed the worms. Drop a small handful of coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, or tiny bits of banana peel directly down the neck. Coffee grounds are especially good. The fine texture decomposes slowly, and the nitrogen content works like a dinner bell for earthworms. Step 7. Maintain with almost no effort. Every 3 to 4 weeks, a little more organic matter goes down the neck. On very hot days,
A small amount of water poured down the chimney delivers moisture directly to the deep roots, bypassing the surface evaporation that wastes so much water in summer. That is the whole method, nothing more. Now, what to watch for? Within 2 to 3 weeks, small piles of earthworm castings will start appearing at the surface near the bottles. Those little mounds are confirmation. The underground army has been activated. And within 1 growing season, a simple test reveals everything. Push a trowel 8 inches down beside a bottle. Then do the same in an untreated area a few feet away. The untreated clay will still fight the trowel, dense, gray, stubborn. But near the bottle, the soil will break apart like warm cake. Darker, richer, alive. And instead of smelling like stagnant mud, it will carry the scent of a forest floor after a gentle rain. That smell is the smell of life coming back. Part 9. A Legacy Worth Leaving.
Here is what all of this comes down to. Everything shared in this video costs nothing, not a single dollar. No ongoing trips to the store, no annual purchases, no expensive machinery collecting dust in the garage. And this is not a Band-Aid the way liquid conditioners are, products that wear off after a few weeks and send a person right back to the checkout counter for another bottle. This method rebuilds the living structure of soil from the inside, permanently. The $8.5 billion soil amendment industry did not build itself on solutions that work forever. It built itself on solutions that work just long enough to keep people coming back. But now, there is another way. After decades of gardening, the most important lesson always comes down to the same thing. The best gardeners are not the ones who fight the earth into submission. They're the ones who learn to listen to it, who figure out what it needs and then gently provide it. A plastic bottle buried in the soil is not a hack. It is not a trick. It is an act of listening, a quiet message to the earth. There is an understanding now that the soil needs to breathe, and here is a little help. And the earth, in its own quiet way, answers, with roots that grow deep, with soil that crumbles in the hand like chocolate cake, and with harvests that remind a person why they fell in love with gardening in the first place. If this changed anything, even just a little, there is one thing that would mean the world. Share this video with one person, just one, a neighbor, a friend, someone in the gardening club whose hands are tired from fighting stubborn clay. The best kind of knowledge is the kind that gets passed along freely, generously, the way garden wisdom used to travel over the back fence. And leave a comment below. How deep does the clay run? What is growing above it? Every single comment gets read, and those stories shape what Rooted in Grace explores next.
Until next time, keep the hands in the dirt, keep the heart full of grace, and remember, the soil does not need to be conquered. It just needs to be understood. Stay rooted, friends.